for the first time, started to really enjoy connecting with people in very simple ways, who looked different, spoke different languages. And I became a parent, a mom for the first time, and having my own baby daughter in my arms, I realized that I couldn't just to be living like that. One day I thought, like, instead of trying to do something big in the future, what if we did something small and did it every day?
What does the journey look like from here for you, Masami?
Every time something good happens in the business, something great happens in the world. And I was living in Australia as like a resident, but not a citizen, so I didn't have a full medical coverage to have a childbirth.
Hi everyone, I'm Gauri. I'm the host of Business of Building, and I am very, very excited to be here introducing you to our new episode with Masami Sato, who's the founder and CEO of B1G1 and who help businesses around the world to integrate effective giving in what they do. The motto for B1G1 is using business for a good purpose. We have touched on her journey, starting from challenges of being a shy girl in Japan growing up, and then traveling around the world without knowing the language, meeting new people, and using her passion for food and cooking to communicate, which I found was absolutely exciting, to moving on to using this passion then to build a business, being a young mum and starting a business and the challenges she faced during that. I mean, I always ask the guests what was the biggest risk they have taken, and the risk she spoke about was quite interesting, which is at the end of the show. Just please do tune in, because it relates to the challenges of being a parent and being part of a thriving business and trying to treat that as your own child as well as your family, which is true for any parent. And just exploring that journey, moving on, this small seed of an idea she had about what, I've seen so much during my travels, and I've seen there are people with issues and what can I do? And while she had the business, it was more about, can I wait until I have enough money to do the right thing, or should I start taking small steps? And that gave the birth to the idea of B1G1, which was absolutely fascinating, and I'm so excited to share this journey for Masami with all of you, and really look forward to getting some reviews, hearing what you have to say. And if you enjoyed the episode with Masami and the other episodes, I really appreciate any feedback, and I'm so looking forward to sharing this with you. Thank you so much. Thanks Masami as well, and please do subscribe, like and listen to our podcast Business of Building. Thank you. Hi Masami, thank you so much for joining us today on this beautiful Friday morning. I am so excited for several reasons, but one of it being passionate about making an impact using business for good. And you are representing B1G1, you are the founder, the CEO of the company, and one of the main things you have is business for purpose, using business for a purpose, and that is so beautiful, and having that impact on the communities, on the world. How did the journey begin? How was B1G1 formed? How did the idea come up? What was the journey before? I want to know it all. If you don't mind going through the journey, that would be amazing.
Yeah, because I wonder how far I should go back to. Like, should I go all the way to the beginning?
Wherever, yeah. I'd be definitely interested.
Yeah, so I think, all of us here, and then the people who are listening to this interview as well, I think every person has a journey, and it comes from right at the beginning, right? And then a thread of events and interactions, connections, and experiences like form our entire journey and then take us to where we are today. So for me too, being in a position to be running this global initiative today, like I would have never imagined, when I was growing up. So going back right to the beginning, I was in Japan. I was born in Tokyo, grew up in the lower middle class family. And I remember being very, very shy and introverted in my childhood. I'm still quite like introverted sometimes, but I was very, very quiet. And I didn't know how to communicate with others or with other kids. And then my father was working for this large Japanese food company, and he was often transferred to different branches within Japan. So I remember moving to school, in a new school in the middle of the term multiple times, and being this very, very shy child to be in a class full of strangers, right? Like, and then to try to connect with others, it was so challenging. So I was, very quiet all the time. And I like to even spend more time in the nature and then connecting with insects and animals. So that was me.
That was the way. Wow. Right? To already be that shy kid and then having to move and form new relationships and new friendships every time. Do you find that again, or do you find it easier now that you have had that experience to transition into relationship or
so anyway, what happened was one thing I had even at that time was probably a sense of curiosity. And so I remember spending most of my school holidays with my grandparents, because my grandparents had a family business in Tokyo. And so during the summer holidays, I will be spending time learning about the business and taking care of the shop and serving customers, sweeping the floor. So I was doing everything with them. And that was a fascinating time, working. And I loved working, but I also loved being in the business space, like a family business space. So then when I finally graduated from school in Japan, that curiosity about, trying to figure out why certain things were happening. And so I wanted to experience the world outside of Japan too. So I decided to go study English and then travel overseas. And so I became a backpacker and ended up spending a few years traveling around the world with limited funding. So so that was during that time.
Did you have a plan, Masami? Did you have countries to do, or was it just freestyle?
Yeah, well, because initially the plan was to just learn English, right? Because I couldn't even speak English. So, and beyond that, I didn't really have a plan. But what happened was once I started to travel and then to be in the space where I even couldn't speak the language that everybody else was speaking, I finally had to surrender, not to try to say the right thing or not do the right thing, or because I was so vulnerable in the new space. So I let go, and I for the first time started to really enjoy connecting with people in very simple ways. And then I realized when I was backpacking, wherever I went, and of course, like at first it was a little intimidating to connect with people who looked different, spoke different languages, and had different culture. But when I was open and willing and vulnerable, there were always people who came to help me whenever I needed help. So I realized that actually, even when we seemed to be different, we had something in common, which was probably like a joy of, eating together, or, so those simple things like connected to me with others. And I really started to enjoy that pure sense of connection and the interaction and the learning from everybody. So that was that time also when I started to see things that really didn't make sense to me. So for example, when I was growing up in Japan, my family wasn't well-to-do. So I had issues, family, like financial issues and things like that too. But in my own country, actually children could go to school, even if you come from, relatively poor family. But in other countries, I realized that there are so many kids who couldn't even complete primary school education, or they had to work every day in the field or go and then beg on the street. So for me, like that kind of reality really didn't make sense, because, if there were children who had issues, then surely I thought that the people would come to help. Right, but it wasn't the case. So eventually, like I because I didn't know what to do, even though those things disturbed me, I decided to just let go and then continue to travel and then continue to go on with my own life. But then years later, when I became a parent, a mom for the first time, and having my own baby daughter in my arms, I realized that I couldn't just to be living like that, right? Because my daughter was lucky enough to be born in an environment where she will be taken care of. But there were lots of other kids who weren't like that. And then I thought, what if my daughter was born in that circumstance? And then if the world said, sorry, we can't help because we don't have a power to change what's happening. So that's when I decided to start a business and became an entrepreneur. And that was over 21 years ago. Then, yeah. And at that time, it was
2 decades. Amazing.
Yeah, more than 2 decades. And at that time, it was a food company I started because I realized food really brought people together. And for me, it was a way to communicate and connect, because when I couldn't speak English, I could still cook. And that actually let me be in a position to enjoy the connection with others too. So I wanted to start a food company. And also I thought that one day when this company is really successful, we would be able to start something that gives back. Right, and then to set up a perhaps food soup kitchen to feed and educate the children. So we had dreams and we started the business. But then about 5 or 6 years later, when we are still working really hard and our business have grown, and one day in Australia, our company was doing packaged frozen meal distribution. And we had over 150 retail stores selling our products in Australia in multiple states. At that time, I realized that we were still not able to do anything because we were too busy, or we are putting all the money back into business to develop the business, right? So then I thought, maybe if we kept going thinking we were not ready yet, then maybe in 10 or 20 years time, we would still be saying the same thing. We're not ready yet. just with bigger business.
Sometimes you find every reason, don't you, to push it, keep pushing. And I need to focus on this today. I need to focus on that today. And taking that.
So that's why one day I thought instead of trying to do something big in the future, what if we did something small and did it every day? And that was the idea of B1G1. And then in the beginning, we used to call it buy one, give one, because we wanted to give a meal for every meal we sold. And that was the initial idea, which was born through that food company. But several months later, I had another realization that even though we could do that alone, and that is already great, I thought, what if it was really easy for any business around the world to be able to say, every time something good happens in our business, then we will help make something great happen to others around the world too. And then if we created a simple way, a process and a system to make that happen, what could we achieve together? And eventually we sold the food business in Australia and moved to Singapore and started to B1G1 as the global initiative. So that was 15 years ago.
I mean, what I was about to say, and you have achieved 300 million giving impacts recently. I mean, what landmarks, and you have won Business of Purpose, I think Business for Good awards recently as well. It's absolutely incredible. So it grew from this idea of yourself personally wanting to do something good and we do that every time as well, don't we? Even if we go on a holiday, you're thinking, I'm going to book this holiday in 6 months' time. I'm going to go wherever I'm going to go and I'm going to have so much fun, but I have to work so hard. Whereas you can have those small bits of holidays during your day-to-day life. It's basically that thinking broken down into giving, that you don't have to wait for 10 years when I have a house and a car and a this and a that, and then I will give. You are doing it as you go, and you gain the momentum of what you have given as an impact as you go. What has what does the journey look like from here for you, Masami, for B1G1, for you personally? What are I wouldn't want to say the goals, but what I'm sure you have some sort of an idea of what you and the team would like to achieve for the business.
So when we started 15 years ago, the world was not like this today. And there weren't too many businesses thinking about, even like social responsibility or social impact. So it wasn't a common idea. But
It
then
was it was at the time it was called the CSR, isn't it? Corporate social
yeah,
responsibility. And
people
then
start people started to talk about the CSR, but because it's called corporate social responsibility, a lot of small to medium-sized businesses didn't think that it was also something that they could do. Or no. So things changed quite a lot. And today, I think there is more awareness and desire for the business community to participate in the social change. And we know that we must all do that, because otherwise, the current way of how we are driving businesses is not sustainable, right? Like, and then there are so many issues that we need to come in to help solve. And again, like we still see the inherent power of businesses, because if this was all about, like, let's say charitable donations, then that alone cannot solve all of the issues. I think primarily who can be the most powerful change maker in our society and communities is actually the businesses. And businesses happen everywhere, every day. Even when we are not thinking about anything, every single day, like we are actually being touched by all kinds of different businesses and surrounded by these businesses. So I think the real change can only happen when we mobilize this power of business at the maximum potential, and then link those activities with the social change that we need to create. And part of it, we believe that this micro form of sharing the kindness through everything we do in business is very transformative. And it's also good for the business, because all of us today is looking for more greater meaning and purpose in our work, rather than just working, just paying bills, just advancing in our career
yeah,
journey.
and it kind of, because it breaks it down to the micro level, as you said, it makes it less overwhelming, and it is a lot more. And it was quite interesting. I was speaking to Paul, your co-founder, on Tuesday as well, and he said something. We have tried to make giving on B1G1 like Amazon. What are your thoughts on that? And we were running through the website, and it was so intuitive. So also, whilst I asked you this question, may I request you to touch on how B1G1 works and how you set up the partnership? What is the process for our listener?
Sure. So the previous question you asked was where we were going, right? Like, so basically, like where we want to go and need to go is to make sure that every business and every action enabled by business would have a social impact element. And the B1G1 want to play a part in making that happen everywhere around the world. And the world has millions and millions of businesses. So that potential is huge. So that's kind of like where we are going. And so today, like we have created, our members have created over 300 million giving impacts, those acts of kindness, from planting trees to providing access to water, to education, to microloan, to all sort of things, right? So we can actually make these things happen much more moving forward and faster, and especially tapping into the power of technology. So then let me talk about how B1G1 makes these things happen with that in mind.
Sorry,
So,
I've got so many things going on.
no, me too, me too. And so the mechanism, idea is very simple, but mechanism is a little bit more complex. So B1G1 has two entities. One is a social enterprise called B1G1 or Buy One Give One. And then there is another charity entity called B1G1 Giving. So this social enterprise has the platform and then the business initiative to add value to the businesses that we work with and help them utilize this platform, and then to create their own unique giving stories and enable their effective giving. And so the businesses can have all sort of like tools and resources that they can use. to choose the projects and then to link the project activities with their business action. And then they could even automate that tracking of the business activities so that every time something happens, such as every Zoom call, or every time somebody register for their event, or every lead created in the their system, or so all these actions can turn into the impact that they choose to create, and then track their impact with their impact counter, live counters, and so on. Then when those businesses are giving through B1G1, then the giving will go to this sister organization called B1G1 Giving. And B1G1 Giving has the criteria for the what they call the program. So charity organizations from around the world can apply to be part of this program. And then if they can qualify all of the conditions that is set by the board of B1G1 Giving, then they could list their project in B1G1. And then we would do the breakdown of their project activities into micro units so that businesses giving can have a tangible and measurable and countable impacts, right? Like, so then 100% of their giving then goes to the project that businesses choose to support. So that's the kind of like a mechanism of B1G1. But in a sense, like how it's expressed is very, very simple. Every time something good happens in the business, something great happens in the world.
Which is so fantastic. Can I go to how you pick the charities who are part of the impact stories, as you mentioned? So do they have to have, because a lot of them are working at a very grassroots levels, if I would call it, in the communities. So do they need to have a certain financial savviness, or do you help them? Do you know what I mean? So let's say I am running a charity of education here, and do I need to come with a business case for B1G1, or do you hold their hand and say, okay, this is what it looks like? How would that work?
So there is a certain benchmark. So again, like the sweet spot for the B1G1 program is for the organizations that have been operating at least certain number of years, and the minimum is 3 years, but ideally like 5 years plus. And then also they have to have a minimum, meet minimum criteria such as being able to provide financial reporting with audited accounts. So there are certain things that we require. But another more important part is that those organizations have the experience with a very specific type of activities. And so they understand what is actually best for the community and what makes a difference. And they have done it for quite enough period to understand the financial statistics around the activities, because the B1G1 model helps them to break down the impact into measurable unit, and then we would actually raise the funding that fulfills that impact activity. So there need to be certain criteria, but we basically don't target the really large the organizations either, because there is this sweet spot of organizations that are actually close to the ground activity, on the ground activities, and they are connected with local leaders, because solving the certain problems in certain community is never about people from outside to say this is how to solve this problem. It's really about understanding the kind of real root cause of the issue, and then to find the way that works in that particular circumstance. So it actually requires a close engagement with the community and understanding. So that means small to medium size charity organizations with really good track record and history, and the transparency around their financial management. So that's the kind of best match with the B1G1 program.
It's so beautiful. I mean, it's sometimes you end up giving a t-shirt to students where they actually need the books. So you are trying to make sure that because the organizations work closer to the community, they know that they need books, and that's what they're looking. I guess one of the things which I found very beautiful about this, the structure right now with B1G1, was the visibility of your impact and where it's going, because And just to link it back, I was speaking to a parent at our son's school. Our little one, on last birthday, he wanted to raise money to plant trees. So he doesn't like presents. So for him, it's incredible that he's thinking like that. So the parent was asking me, so how would you pick a charity, for example, because we donate money to X charity, but we don't know where it goes. And I wish I could show her the B1G1 website there as well, because it was quite nicely, and it breaks down. So you don't have to worry about buying a bicycle for a student. You can actually give X amount to rent the bicycle for one day. So it was from one day to buying a bike, and I love that part of it. Did it start like that? Did you always have that plan in mind that it is going to be as micro as this and as big as that?
Yes, because
Nice.
really the idea was, imagine like from day one, we were imagining a world where every time business happens, something good happens in the world, right? Like, and then if it was starting from, okay, every time somebody has a cup of coffee, or every time somebody reads a book, or every time somebody goes to see a doctor, or so if we think about all these things that's happening every day, of course, like how much impact that can be created through that need to be relatively small. So we had that idea in mind. But it's been work in progress and ongoing review of the entire process to really identify the methodology. But what we had clearly in mind was to create this like common methodology to break down the impact unit. So in B1G1 way, things are broken down in micro unit, such as one item. So it could be like one brick being given toward building a school, or it could be like one book to be given, or one tree to be planted. So anything that is like countable as one micro unit, then we will count that as one item and one impact. But at the same time, there are certain things that's not so countable, such as education, access to education. How do we make sure we can count this? Then our common language is to break down access to such opportunities into days of access. So one day of access to clean water, or one day's access to sanitation, one day's access to quality education. So when we do this, then at least there is like a common language. So building one well could be quite expensive for the community. But when we actually break it down based on the statistics of, for example, how long the well lasts and how many people live in the community, and then do the breakdown, then one day's access to clean water could come down to just a few cents per day, right? Like, and then if it's just a few cents per day, then businesses could actually fund this very easily. So yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. We touched on CSR earlier when you started, as it were, B1G1. The recent thinking is towards the ESG part of it. What thoughts do you have on ESG? And also, how do you think B1G1 can help the businesses touch on various aspects of ESG?
I think the micro contribution for business can play an important part in the kind of beginning of this new awareness, because when things are really, really complicated, then businesses will find it very difficult to get started, especially for SMEs. So ESG concept is also relatively complex if you try to perfectly implement ESG, right? But the thing is, we got to start from somewhere, and then we got to start from something that kind of ignite greater consciousness and new creativity, so that we can continue to do more and better as we go. So if it is as easy as $1 to plant a tree, and then you can actually do it whilst you are also reflecting and reviewing and revising your own internal business practice, because we need to do both, right? Like, we cannot just do external thing and then not to change our internal actions. So all the businesses should definitely think about how we can ourselves transform as a company, including internal policy making to the day-to-day environmental practice, or employee relations, like all the kind of things we could do. But at the same time, when we start actually doing something that is beyond like their, our own gain. So when businesses actually create value and do good through their business services, then if they are actually allocating a little bit of effort and resources to do something good for the outer world, that actually can trigger, the different sense of connection among their team members or even with the customers, and to help them become actually a little bit more caring or a little bit more grateful for the things that they are doing every day. So I think like
positive culture, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the start of creating a culture, doing something small, but starting now is important. But doing something regularly so that it becomes a part of who we is also very, very important.
It's like a habit. It's
Yes.
practicing giving on every action, and who knows, it changes the way. If I say I'm gonna give every time I do a workout, it might push me to do more healthy things, push me to be more active, and you can use it for positive reinforcement in various different ways as well, isn't it? So for me, it's an absolute incredible initiative, B1G1. Do you always get members coming to you with wanting to introduce community-led projects which could be a part of the impact, or do you normally go and look out in the world for community-led projects which you could be a part of? So what I'm trying to understand is it like a very symbiotic relationship?
Yeah, definitely. Like some cases, yes, or many cases, the causes join us through introductions from the business community, but also the what they call the community, because some organizations know other organizations that are also doing good work as well, right? But at the same time, there are certain cases where we actively try to source a particular type of project activities based on the desire of the businesses that we work with. So right in the beginning, most businesses wanted to give to projects like education project or health project, because people felt more like emotionally connected to helping vulnerable people, right? But these days, actually, there is so much more, greater desire for businesses want to support environmental projects. So yeah, that's why like certain cases based on the demand and needs, we would also go out and then actively seek out or, actively ask for recommendations about a particular type of activities as well.
That's so interesting that it's coming together, really, isn't it?
I have this plant tower, and I'm growing herb and vegetable inside the house. And then I realized that the water fountain goes on every half an hour, and it started to go. So I just had to mute and stop the water.
So you
So
have
that's why.
so you have a vegetable growing space
Yes,
in the house.
inside the house next to me.
Oh wow! Can you share a photo of me later, because I'd like to see.
Yeah, sure.
What I find is so ahead in these techno. I know that there are. I read. Sorry, I'm jumping here, but I heard a beautiful quote, which is, "You are always asked to think outside the box, but actually, when you're in the box, you are the most creative in a way because you have those constraints." And I guess that's what our planet is asking us, isn't it? That you have the planetary boundaries and constraints, and how can you now try to develop the way you consume things where you're not taking too much. So for me, Singapore has always been like ahead in those things. So I'd like to see what that looks like, to be honest.
Oh, sure. Yeah. But
Um,
I come from more like a nature background, because there was a time in my youth, I spent 2 years working with farmers in Japan. So at that time, I was like trying to create the self-sufficient life and not to buy into consumerism. And because I was trying to like find a way to not to cause harm for the world. So that's why when it's possible, I'm more like hands-on, grow food in the soil, but in Singapore, space is limited, so
So you have to find innovative ways. This is a very interesting point you pick up, Masami, as well, is self-sustainability and self-reliance. How and then you need time for it because having some space to grow things and stuff, but you need time to go and tend and stuff. But you also run. You are a CEO of a company. How do you balance those two things? Because that's the one question I get asked so many times. Like, how do you balance this?
well, like I think people probably today think more and more about life work balance and things like that, right? For me, I don't think I'm a good example or good at balancing things like intentionally to try to draw a line between work life and family life and personal life and stuff like that. But I guess like balance is more important in terms of where you feel like a fulfillment and on a day-to-day basis and enjoy your life, right? Like, so how many hours you work or how much work you do or how much time you spend with family is not necessarily like the accurate description of how connected you are or how fulfilled you are in your life. So sometimes you might work a lot, but then you might love working. Or, sometimes you might spend more time with family. Sometimes you might spend less time with family, but they have a kind of like a really important, honest conversation and have a quality time. Or so I think the quality of time is more important than the amount of time itself. So I guess like when I don't feel like really good in some way, like not as connected, then doing things like, okay, just taking time off or going running, or play sports or yeah, that kind of things like also get me connected. But as far as I enjoy working and I'm finding the joy in the things that I do, I don't tend to count the hours or time I spend. Just time disappears.
Wow, how beautifully put, because that's the beauty of it, isn't it? If you're finding fulfillment in what you're doing and you're enjoying it, then it's okay. And you don't have to feel guilty because you're trying to head towards this line in the sand, as you said, 5 o'clock, then I start and being present in what you're doing. So if you're having family time, be present there, and if you're working, be present there, kind of thing. So how beautifully put, because that's one thing which a lot of people are trying to figure out, especially since COVID, when everything seems to be mashed up together and workplace has come into the horizon and all that. But Masami,
Yeah.
thank you so much. But I'm not going to say thank you yet. I still have one question, which I request every guest to answer. Would be, what is the biggest risk you have taken, and what were your learnings from the risk?
Oh, okay. I can think of a few things. Like I probably
Go for
always
it. Go for
taking
it.
risk as an entrepreneur, but there were a couple of times. So one was probably when I was running the food company, which I talked about earlier. And because in the early days, we actually went through a lot of challenges, trying to do something that was a little bit too early for that time, trying to create an online food delivery service. And that was before people were actually ordering anything online, right? So then
I
we
mean,
had a
you.
lot of difficulty.
That's how I survived through COVID.
Yeah. Today, like that business would have been perfect, but 20 years ago, it was a little bit too early. So we struggled. And then what happened was when we just signed up with Big Lease and, I had a 2-year-old child, then at that time I became accidentally pregnant again. And then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a baby, but I don't know what to do. So then I kept working throughout my pregnancy. And then 1 month before the child was due, and I was living in Australia as like a resident, but not a citizen. So I didn't have a full medical coverage to have a childbirth. So I actually ended up, delivering my child by myself in a commercial
Oh
kitchen.
my.
Probably one one risk I took, but I had a feeling that it will all go well. And then because that was the second child and the first one was born.
You knew the drill.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, and I today have two, healthy grown-up children, and they're great. So
It's just dedication to the purest level in the commercial kitchen as well. You're so dedicated to work. You are like, this is it.
no, for me, interestingly, because previously I traveled and backpacked around the world. And at that time, I met so many people who were in very difficult situation. They didn't have any security. They didn't have so much food, and they were sleeping on the floor, but they still invited me to eat with them. And they were like smiling, still smiling. They were still generous, even though what they had was so limited. And thinking of it, like whenever I had my own challenges and difficulty, even though sometimes like I get stuck in that kind of feeling of fear or something like that, then I remind myself that actually I'm still okay. I still have a lot, and if we are healthy and we still have good relationships, then we could overcome anything compared to a lot of people who had greater challenges. So yeah, so that definitely helps to be able to kind of be like grateful for whatever little we have at any time. Then usually the problems are not that super challenging. So and it is challenging, we still find a way to overcome.
No, it's so nicely put, Masami, because just to share a story from my mum and her friends who have done a pilgrimage in India around a river, and you're not allowed to take money with you, and you have to buy food. You can't buy food. You just eat food you're given by the people. And one of the experience she said was there was a time there, and the people who live around the river, they're very, very poor. And so, but they share. And she was saying there was one evening they came to a house and you could see they barely had anything for themselves, but they shared the onion and the roti, which is the bread, with my mum and her friend as well. And she was like, that is the most humbling experience to have, where they're still open and welcoming, as you said, and loving to give it to you. And sometimes it feels like we have so much and we still, are we doing the right thing? Are we giving enough, kind of thing? So, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Masami. And on that note, I'd like to say, I am all in on B1G1. Actually, Paul Dunn, who is the co-founder, mentioned something which was nice, to have an account for the little children as well, because they can see what they can have an impact on as well. So that's the next thing for us, to have one for our little boy, which will be quite an interesting journey. Thank you so much for your time. And I can't. This will be the best Friday for me.
Wow. Thank you for having me. And thank you everybody for listening to this episode as well.